Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, WEEI's John Lyons. John, happy Sunday morning to you.
Yeah, believe it or not, we were just talking off air. We're just about a month away from the NFL draft. So it's already kind of around the corner here. It's March 23rd. It's just about a month away.
It really is. And of course, this is a big week for local prospects. All the local pro days in New England, in terms of the colleges, will be this week. There'll be other team related workouts and pro days moving forward, but all the local pro days are this week, starting tomorrow with Boston College. We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll talk about some of the local prospects and some potential tie ins to the Patriots. But I would say, John, that the biggest story to start the show, the biggest story this week, of course, was Pro Bowl and All Pro wide receiver Stephon Diggs being in town for a free agent visit. The Athletics' Chad Graff had it first on Wednesday that Diggs was in town and that he was visiting for the Patriots. It appears that he met with Patriots brass. Sounds like it was a good visit. He didn't leave town with a contract. To be honest with you, John, and I've said this to you in the past, I'm kind of surprised by that, because here's Vrabel talking about culture and rebuilding the program with culture and character. And I'm not saying that Stephon Diggs is a bad person, but he's been a diva in the past. It kind of led to him being traded out of Buffalo. Were you surprised that they brought in Stephon Diggs, or is this proof that they perhaps are doing their due diligence on all of the veteran receivers that are still on the market?
Yeah, I think it's definitely proof they're doing their due diligence. I wasn't necessarily surprised per se that they brought him in. I was a little surprised they brought him in maybe instead of an Amari Cooper. And the reason I say that is, look, we've talked a lot on this show. I've talked about it on EEI. A lot of people have talked about this. They have no one in their passing game that the defensive coordinator has to game plan around. And they haven't really since Rob Gronkowski retired. Maybe if you want to include Edelman before he got hurt and retired, but it's been a long time. Diggs is a guy that defensive coordinators would have to game plan around, or at least think of in their game plan. But there's some concerns there that maybe Amari Cooper doesn't have. You mentioned the diva stuff, but also he's coming off a major injury and he won't play until October. So then he's going to have to get up to speed in October with Drake May. And I'm not saying it can't work. I just thought, and you mentioned this last week on the show, maybe Amari Cooper would be the direction they would go, but it doesn't seem like they've had him in for a visit at all. So I wasn't necessarily surprised they've talked to Diggs. I was a little bit surprised it was Diggs instead of a Cooper, or even if you want to go to Cooper Kupp a couple weeks ago and some of the other options that were out there as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you bring up a good point with the injury. Even if you sign him to a one-year deal, and that's all it would be, I highly doubt that they would sign him to a multi-year deal or a one-year deal with an option type of situation. It would be a true one-year deal. If you sign Stephon Diggs to a one-year deal, he's probably not going to be back until October. Now, in essence, it's not really a one-year deal. And here's the thing. We're talking about a torn ACL here. We're talking about a player who's north of 30. What's he going to look like when he comes back as a wide receiver off a torn ACL at his age? I don't think you're going to necessarily get the player that some people think you're going to get. And yes, he's been a Patriots killer through the years during his time in Buffalo. But again, this move doesn't really make any sense to me if you make it. Amari Cooper, clearly he doesn't have much left in the tank. He's not the player he was even 2 years ago when he had a good year in Cleveland. He had, of course, he had that huge game against the Houston Texans. He might not be that player, but he's been a guy that, relatively speaking, has been pretty durable in his career. He's healthy. You know what you're going to get. He could still be a guy and create matchups for you. I think, in my opinion, the way I look at it, I just didn't get the Diggs visit. It doesn't fit with what they want to do in terms of roster construction. The player is an older player coming off a major injury. I'd be shocked, in my opinion, John, if they sign him. And I think if they sign him, I don't know what to make of it, because, again, I just don't see him being an impactful player here. And you can't sell me on the fact that you're going to bring him in here to what, be a leader in your room? Like, no way. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is a guy, again, who his last year in Buffalo burned some bridges. There was a disconnect there with him and Josh Allen. There was a reason they moved on from him. I'm not so sure even though he's been a good pro in his career and a very productive player, borderline Hall of Famer, I'm not sure that this is what the Patriots need right now in that receiver room. I think that they need a little bit more from a leadership standpoint. I'm not sure Diggs provides it.
Yeah, and it's a good point, right? Because I mean, you remember the end of Buffalo. He didn't go to the first day of minicamp, and some people said it was a big deal, and some people said it wasn't, but you knew it was kind of a big deal. And he ends up out of there, and now he's out. And look, part of the reason he might be out of Houston, they have Nico Collins. I know Tank Dell's injured, but he's coming back. Like they do have a good group of young receivers, and maybe they want those guys to ascend. So I mean, it's not necessarily that this guy, to your point to start the show, that he's some terrible guy that no one wants around. But I think Houston probably looked at it and says, this guy's coming off an injury. Sometimes he can be a headache. We have this good group of young receivers. We'll just move on. And for the Patriots, the problem with them is they don't really have a good group of young receivers. Like Demario Douglas, you and I like him. He's a solid player, but he's not a guy a defense is game planning around. Polk and Baker had massively disappointing rookie season. So if you bring Diggs in, who, by the way, was on pace for 1,000 yards last year before he got hurt, if you bring him in, your wide receiver room talent-wise, no doubt, it's better. But even if they sign him, John, that doesn't solve your whole problem. Like, it's not like you're bringing in DK Metcalf or AJ Brown.
Exactly. And he's not going to make an immediate impact. And look, we've said this throughout this offseason so far, that their best avenue to improve at that position is via trade. That ship has probably sailed at this point. You never know. Obviously, trades do go down during draft weekend. But again, I just – it's not even a scheme fit thing for me. I think Diggs can fit any scheme. That's not the issue here. The issue is, again, your head coach is talking about rebuilding this program with character guys, culture guys, pretty much every guy they've signed, they've had a coaching connection to. There's a coaching connection there with Diggs when he was in Minnesota and Todd Downing. He was a tight ends coach. Bit of a stretch if you ask me. But again, I just don't see it when you look. And here's the other thing that I think is an important point, and I think you'll agree with me on this. There's some immaturity in that Patriots receiver room, okay? Douglas has complained about his role in the past. There's some sulking there with Polk. Obviously, there's some behavior stuff with Javon Baker and some maturity issues there. Again, I think that Stephon Diggs is a very good pro, but he's a receiver. There's some diva qualities there. Is he the right veteran to bring into that room to teach these guys how to be pros? Most people will tell you he is. I would beg to differ. I don't think he is. I think you need someone who's going to lead more by example than with their mouth, because this group does have some growing up to do. They need to learn how to become professional. And again, I hate to harp on it, but I think a guy like Amari Cooper might be a little bit of a better leader for the room, if you will, than a Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and I would also add, I mean, Kayshon Boutte got arrested for sports gambling and then complained in the media about play calling and his targets during the season. So, like,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and when I look at that group, and you and I talked about this, we talked about the wide receiver coaching last year. We talked about the group itself too. A lot of instances of poor technique too when it came to blocking, and which I know a lot of people don't care about, but I think that speaks to the professionalism.
You're a collegiate receivers coach, you know,
right? And I think that speaks to the professionalism, right, and the attention to detail, right? Or guys not getting off well at the line. Sometimes that's talent, sometimes that's attention to detail, right? The inconsistency. So I think. Look, we know that they need to add to this receiver room. It's just I feel like they've kind of missed the boat on the guy, because even DK Metcalf, who there's some rumors, reports out there that he can be a headache sometimes. He's a much better player than Diggs. He's healthier and he's younger, and he's played with young receivers. He just played with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it went all right during the year from all indications. So I think he would have been a better fit. Obviously, Cooper Kupp would have been a better fit. I just think there were better options out there, and it feels even Brandon Cooks, who I know no one wants back here, and I know he's older and he's lost a little bit, from a professionalism standpoint and a production standpoint, would have been a fit as well. Like, it feels like they missed the boat on really all the good options, because again, even if Diggs ends up being great and works out well, the earliest you'll see him is probably Columbus Day. So that's a tough part of it too.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. You know what I mean? He's not going to make the immediate impact that you need. And I think with where they're at, and when you look at what they've done in free agency, the expectation is that they're going to be in playoff contention next year. And quite frankly, when you look at their schedule, they should be in playoff contention. Now, will they make the playoffs? that remains to be seen. I mean, we have the rest of the offseason to discuss how they'll finish. But at the end of the day, clearly, when you look at how they've spent in free agency, they don't plan on improving by 2 or 3 games. They want to improve by 5 or 6 games and be on that graphic at the end of the season as being in contention or in a playoff position. So clearly that is the key. A couple of other notes here. Patriots continue to be busy. They did make some cuts this week. They also brought in Dr. Gibby, as he's called. Gibbons was a linebacker for Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. They brought him in. One of the other notable moves that they did make, though, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is Cam Robinson. He finally signed. He ended up staying on the market a lot longer than people thought he was going to. He finally signed with the Houston Texans. Apparently, there was some interest there on the part of the Patriots. It looks like they just couldn't come to terms on the finances. Interesting move for Houston, if you ask me, because he's a downgrade over Laramie Tunsil. Obviously, Tunsil was beginning to show signs of decline. That's why they traded him to the Washington Commanders. Got a pretty good haul in return. But Cam Robinson is clearly a downgrade if you're the Houston Texans. For the Patriots, though, despite the fact that he struggled last year in Minnesota, Johnny probably would have been an upgrade. Although, again, when you look at the raw numbers, Vidarian Lowe was not that bad, and he was actually better than Cam Robinson when you look at some of the metrics. That being said, did the Patriots miss the boat here on Cam Robinson and not signing him?
Yeah, I think you could take the probably out of your sentence and just say he would have been an upgrade over what they've had at tackle. And look, I think Vidarian Lowe, and we've talked about this all the way going back to training camp to last year. If he's your 4th tackle on a roster, you're probably in pretty good shape. When he's your starting left tackle, you're not in great shape. And I think Cam Robinson, to be clear, and I feel like we've said this about other guys as well, he's a below average tackle. But a below average tackle in there every week would have been an upgrade over what they've had the last 2 years, and a really big one over what they've had last year. And I think too, like, he went from Jacksonville to Minnesota during the year, which is a little bit of a red flag, right? Why would a team trade a left tackle during the year? But I think if he was in one place all year, like, I expect him to be better in Houston this year than he was last year, right? In the same place, same system all year. And I'm not sitting here telling you he's going to be great, but if he's the 18th best left tackle, better than what you've had. Right. So that to me, again, that's another one where at the very least, they could have given him a couple-year deal for solid money, drafted a developmental tackle, or just drafted a tackle. And if someone beat him out, they beat him out. Or if they didn't have an answer there, at least you would have had someone who is, again, not great, but at least is going to perform at an NFL capable level, even if it's in the bottom half.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think if you're a Patriots fan, you're yearning for some type of an upgrade there at that position, both tackle spots, for that matter. Again, I think it's hard to say. I guess you could make the argument he would have been an upgrade over Vidarian Lowe. The thing that's interesting about Lowe is if you go back and watch the film, he had his moments last year. There was that stretch in the middle of the season where he played pretty well, and then he started to regress again. So consistency is clearly an issue for Lowe. It's also an issue for Cam Robinson. And my only counter to what you said would be, I think if you sign Cam Robinson, you're bringing in more of what you already have, which is guys that have ability but are not consistently good, or guys that just aren't that good but are good enough to be in the league and they're on your roster. And that's kind of been the case with them the last few years at right tackle. But I just think, in my view, I mean, at this stage of the game, you could have taken a flyer on him and got him relatively cheap. Clearly, especially with Doug Marrone here now, this is the interesting part to me. Clearly, there had to be something here. Marrone obviously had to have had a say in this decision-making process where he probably said, look, I think he's worth this, but he might not be worth this. This is what we'd be getting as a player. Vrabel probably looked at it and said, all right, we'll pass and take our chances in the draft. And again, I think the draft is tricky because you don't have that traditional 6'6", 6'6.5", 305-pound left tackle with 34-inch arms and great footwork. That guy's not in this draft. Will Campbell has most of those traits, but we're talking about a guy with sub 33-inch arms. So unless you're willing to go that route in the draft next month, chances are you probably should have taken a flyer on Robinson. But clearly, I think with Marrone being here, there was something there that probably gave them enough trepidation. They probably said, you know what, we're going to let him sit on the market and he can go somewhere else. Certainly, I mean, obviously, we talked about this the last couple of weeks. Patriots also still have a glut along the offensive line. They have a lot of bodies here, especially on the inside, that they need to figure out. Of course, the other big story this week is linebacker Christian Ellis was signed to a restricted free agent offer sheet by the Las Vegas Raiders. The Patriots have until tomorrow to match it. My question to you, John Lyons, is do they match or do they let Christian Ellis walk? A guy who kind of flew under the radar last year, but was a steadying presence for them. He was pretty good, and might I add, a great guy to deal with. He was really good in the locker room. Is this something the Patriots should do? Should they match this offer sheet, or
So
should
I don't
they
think
let Ellis walk?
Yeah, I think they're going to let him walk. And look, he's a really good special teams player. I don't think he's a really effective NFL linebacker on every down. And they invested a lot of money in Robert Spillane. They'll have Jawan Bentley coming back. They have Tavai there. And I bet you, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, that's going to be a place where on early day 3 of the draft, they invest in some athleticism there as well at linebackers. So I don't think they're necessarily, I mean, I wouldn't hate if they did, but I think they're just as fine to let him go, invest in a little more youth in the draft. Because again, your starting linebacker, if they come out and play nickel, your starting linebackers are going to be probably Spillane and Bentley. And that those two spots are going to be solid. And then you have Tavai, you add one other young guy, and then all of a sudden, not a lot of room for Christian Ellis, unless they really value him on special teams where he was solid last year. But I don't know if I see them really matching this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to match it. It's not big money by today's standards, but I believe it's what I think they offered him. I believe it was a $3.26 million deal,
which is the lowest level tender. Excuse me.
Excuse me. Yeah. So I mean, again, it's not that it's big money, but to your point, you signed Spillane to big money. You got Jawan Bentley coming back off injury. You still have Jelani Tavai. I agree with you. I do think that they're probably going to add another linebacker in the draft. Again, we're living in a world now where you're mostly in sub packages on defense anyway. You very rarely are you strictly in base now. So again, I don't see it. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be willing to overpay for a guy who, A, is a special teams player predominantly, and B, given the addition of Spillane, the return of Bentley, probably would struggle to make this team out of camp. You're not gonna match it. I would be surprised. And one thing I will say, I would be surprised if they matched it, but part of me wouldn't because the Ellis name does carry some weight around the league. Their dad, Luther Ellis, was a really good player. There's a couple of the other brothers in the league as well. So I'm not saying that they would match it because of his last name, but again, in my dealings with him, he was great to talk to in the locker room. Really positive, really upbeat, deeply religious. Really thankful for having the opportunity with the Patriots last year. And if you're him, you have an opportunity to parlay that into your next contract with the Raiders and make more money. Why not?
Yeah.
Again, I don't see the Patriots bringing him back. You are watching Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, WEEI's John Lyons, and we come to you every Sunday morning in the offseason talking Patriots football. And, of course, the focus now that we're past free agency, and that's in the rearview mirror, the focus is now the NFL draft, as you said earlier, John. It's about a month away, which is hard to believe, man. Doesn't seem that long ago that they botched the Buffalo game and they fired Mayo. And here we are, literally a month away from the NFL draft. The offseason flies by, especially March. And, of course, this is going to be a big week for local NFL draft prospects as the pro day circuit makes its way to New England. Next 4 days starting tomorrow, you're going to have pro days at Boston College on Monday. Tuesday, UConn. Wednesday is the Rhode Island Pro Day, Bryant, URI, Brown, and other local prospects. And on Thursday, you're going to have the Holy Cross Pro Day, where several other schools will be there as well. There'll be other pro days as well. Maine does a pro day. Other schools do individual pro days. But these are the 4 big ones coming up. By my count, there's probably going to be over 100 prospects that have a connection to local schools or played in local programs that are going to be working out and trying to get a shot at playing in the NFL. It's the largest group I've ever seen in the 5 years that we've been covering pro days here in New England Football Journal. This is our 6th year in operation, 5th year covering pro days. This is a large number of prospects. And we're going to start at Boston College, which their pro day is up tomorrow. Kevin Stone and I will be there for that. Really good group. The last couple of years, you had Zion Johnson, you had Zay Flowers. That brought a lot of eyes to Chestnut Hill, specifically Flowers. That was a large contingent that was there to see him 2 years ago. This is their deepest talent group in terms of the draft in the last few years. Of course, the headliner is edge Donovan Ezaraku, coming off a 16.5 sack season for the Eagles. He led the ACC, one of the most dominant defensive players in the country. He followed that up with a great combine. And I think the cherry on the topping for him in terms of being a first-round pick will be tomorrow. I get the sense that he's really going to impress people tomorrow and solidify himself as a first-round pick. But this is a really, really talented group, John, headlined by Donovan Ezaraku.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a much deeper group than we're used to when it comes to Boston College in the draft. I mean, because you said, you look at, Zay Flowers and Zion Johnson, those were one guy each year, right? And then in 2020, they had A.J. Dillon, really one guy. Last year, they had Elijah Jones, Christian Mahogany, two guys, but still, we're talking one or two guys essentially every year in the draft. I mean, go back to...
And I will say, not to cut you off, Mahogany, had he not blown out his ACL 2 years ago, would have been a first-round pick.
Yeah.
At the latest, he goes early second round, but he was profiling as a potential first-round pick as well. So they've had a talent run there in recent years.
And you have to go back, though, to 2019, which is the last time they had more than two guys drafted, right? And that was the class, of course, headlined by Chris Lindstrom. You look at this year's class, I mean, Ezaraku is maybe not the best edge in the class, but he's going to be, I think, a really good NFL edge. Could be on the table for the Patriots at pick 38 if he makes it there. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, you look at two like Ozzie Trapillo, 6'8", 309, like the size, the traits are there. We'll see if he ends up being a tackle full-time in the NFL. I think he probably can, but we'll see. Then, of course, Cam Horsley and Drew Kendall as well, later on at the bottom of the draft. But we're talking, that's four guys right there that could get picked by the end of the 6th round. And then Jack Conley, 6'7", 325 as well at guard. Like, that's another
swing tackle guard type.
Yeah. Right. So there's guys, I mean, that's 5 guys right there that I could all see being drafted, 4 of them probably by the end of the 6th round. So I think, look, it's headlined obviously by Ezaraku at the edge, but it's a pretty deep class for BC, especially at key positions, right? Edge, offensive line, I mean, defensive tackle as well.
It's a very deep group, And you mentioned Ezaraku. I think he's a first-round pick. I think he's off the board anywhere from as early as 15 to possibly 32. He's not going to get there at 38.
I was thinking that 25 range-ish for him, kind of in that neighborhood.
His sweet spot, right. His sweet spot, I think, is going to be probably 18 to 32, 20 to 32. I think that's where he ultimately goes. Ozzie Trapillo, in my opinion, is a second-round talent. I think he is a right tackle long term. I think that the length is there, and it's the desirable length. He's not a natural bender, though, and I think he's going to need to prove tomorrow that he's worked on that area, his flexibility, his ability to be more of a natural bender. That's kind of been the knock on him, is that he doesn't sustain blocks. He tends to fall off of blocks, especially in the run game. He's got to prove tomorrow that the athleticism is there, and that he can do that he can stay on blocks, especially as a run blocker. As a pass blocker, there are times when you watch his tape as a pass blocker, he looks like a guy that can play left tackle. So there's that versatility there. I don't see him sliding inside. He's not big enough in terms of his weight, in my opinion, to pull a Daniel Falele like what Baltimore did, or a Mekhi Becton last year with the Eagles.
And slide him
Becton's
inside. What's Becton? 340, 50 pounds?
I don't see that with Trapillo. Yeah. I think Trapillo physically is longer, leaner. He's more of a tackle. You mentioned Cam Horsley. Cam Horsley is a diamond in the rough in this draft. One of the more underrated players in that program the last few years. And I think a lot of them think, okay, well, they look at him and they say, okay, well, he's more of a shade 2-eye tackle. pretty good run defender, won't give you much as a pass rusher. And the underlying numbers show that. He hasn't put up big pressure numbers, but man, he is a good football player that can be a 3-down player in at certain times. So he's a guy that he's going to go higher than people think. Drew Kendall, look, Pete Kendall's kid, local kid, played at Nobles. He's a guy that is fundamentally sound. He's tough. Yeah, when you look at him, I talked to an NFL scout, John, about Drew Kendall, and they said to me, "Man, what do you think of him?" And I said, and I literally, and we both ended up thinking the same thing. I said, when you look at him when he's not in his pads, you don't get the vibe that this guy's an NFL center, but then you watch him put the pads on and play, and he is so fundamentally sound. He's a guy that could not only get drafted on day 3, but like his father, could end up having a lengthy NFL career, depending on
and a lot of those
where he
things
ends up.
a lot of those things you just mentioned. I mean, you could have said 10 years ago about David Andrews, right? Like you put the pads on him, you watch him play.
Very similar player to David Andrews.
Yeah, you watch him play, and you're like, all right, that's an NFL center. And I think one thing about this draft, it's so deep at defensive tackle, and I think it's got, depending on how Will Campbell is, deep on the interior of the offensive line, which could affect Horsley and Kendall. But I mean, to me, I look at those guys and they're NFL players. I mean, like at the very least.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But there's other guys in this group that is going to work out tomorrow that I would keep a close eye on. Cam Arnold, very productive player, a guy that can play on the edge in nickel packages in terms of being an off-the-ball linebacker. He's a guy that's a former safety, so he has range. He's athletic. He's a Swiss Army knife. He could potentially be a guy in certain packages that can play at all 3 levels. You mentioned Jack Conley. I love that swing potential. He can play right tackle, play left tackle. He can kick inside to guard. In this day and age, where finding that kind of versatility with offensive linemen is getting harder and harder, Jack Conley's a guy who not only is going to get drafted, but I think he's going to go higher than people think. A couple of other guys to keep an eye on in this group. Neto Okpala. The numbers weren't what we thought they were going to be last year. We thought he was going to have a bigger season at New England Football Journal statistically. He didn't, but I do think his best football is ahead of him. He's not as explosive as Ezeraku, but he's a guy that's a little stouter. He can play a little lower to the ground, but he still has explosive pass rush traits, getting off the ball. He's a natural bender. He can play up and down the line of scrimmage. A name to keep an eye on. Excuse me. And another couple of guys to keep an eye on are the 2 running backs, Kai Robichaux and Trayshawn Ward. Both of them, at best, get drafted, but will definitely get a shot to go to camp with someone. I think both of them are draftable. I think both should get drafted. Ward is a versatile 3-down back type. I think Kai Robichaux is a nice complementary bigger back who could really thrive in a timeshare. And then one other name to keep an eye on, another local product, a Dorchester kid, Bryce Keys Brown, the former Georgia State corner who transferred to Boston College last year. Didn't have the impact that we thought he could have, but he's got some really good length. Looks like he has the length and the physical traits that you look for in a boundary corner. Another player to keep in mind.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Kai Robichaux too, because I think that's a guy, probably an undrafted free agent type, maybe a 7th-round pick type guy. But I think when you put him in a backfield where there's a speed element to complement him, he could be a productive NFL running back because he's just, when he runs, for lack of a better term, he's just so powerful. Like he's running guys over, he's breaking tackles, he hits holes, I feel like with authority pretty well. So I think that's a player. I mean, I was at the BC Syracuse game this past fall, and it felt like whenever he had the ball, it took 2 or 3 guys to tackle him. And he was just such a productive runner on a consistent basis. So he doesn't have that explosiveness, that speed element. But I think if you put him in a backfield that has the proper complement to him, you're going to have a productive NFL running back.
No, and that's just it. Like I said, I think if he's in the right timeshare with a change of pace guy that can complement him, I mean, again, the numbers are there. He was very productive the last 2 years, workhorse-esque, bigger back, really good in the vertical run game, John, where he can keep his pad square, hit the hole, and now he has some wiggle to him in the second level. But as we saw time and time again with Robichaux, he is willing to put his shoulder down and run through you. And I think that's the kind of guy that teams look for to complement perhaps a smaller, shiftier back. So I think Kai Robichaux has a good shot at getting drafted. At the very least, he's a priority free agent, and he ends up in an NFL camp. And as far as the Patriots are concerned, and any of these guys at Boston College, Ezeraku is on their radar. I've talked to a couple of scouts that have told me the Patriots like him. Could be, I'm not saying they're going to do this, could be a potential trade back into the first round kind of guy. Again, they could end up doing the reverse of what they did in 2001. Maybe you take a Will Campbell at 4, then you trade back into the first round. And they didn't do this in 2001. They didn't trade back into the first round, but perhaps you could trade back into the first round and take a Donovan Ezeraku. The other thing you could do is you could go defense at 4, and perhaps you take an Ozzie Trapillo in the second round. He will be in play for the Patriots at 38. I think that Jack Conley is another guy that's going to be in play for the Patriots potentially as well on day 3, because again, that swing versatility matters. And another guy that I would keep an eye on for the Patriots, he fits what they want to do schematically. Cam Arnold, again, former safety, played linebacker, can play in the box, can play at the second level off the ball. He can't play safety in the NFL, but in certain packages, you can move him around at the start, pre-snap on the third level, and then work him down before the ball snapped, and you can use them in your pressure game. So a lot of guys there that fit what the Patriots want to do schematically. Tuesday is the UConn Pro Day, and I love this roster. Of course, UConn's coming off a 9-4 season, Fenway Bowl victory over North Carolina, one of the best seasons in program history. Here's the thing with me and UConn, John. 2 things. One, excuse me, I've been doing a lot of talking lately, as you can tell. One, you know that these guys are going to be well coached, especially the defensive guys. I mean, Jim Mora is a tremendous coach. So you know that they're getting NFL caliber coaching. 2, there's a lot of talent at UConn, a lot of NFL level talent. These are guys that can step in, and if they get drafted or signed as free agents, these are guys that can step in and make a team and make an impact. Headlining their group will be right tackle Chase Lunt, who I do think, like Ozzie Trapillo, has the potential to eventually develop into a left tackle. I like him a lot. He could potentially be in play for the Patriots in round 3. Of course, New England does have those 2 third-round picks. When I look at Lunt, John, I see a guy who's a top 75, top 80 player.
Sure. Yeah, and I would probably agree with that. And part of it is, like you said, he's so well coached down there with Jim Mora leading the program, but also, dude, 6'8", 305. Like the measurables are there. He played well last year. And what I really like about Chase Lunt, too, is when you look at his career, he's increased his snaps every year the last 3 years, and he's gotten better. I mean, 2 years ago in 2022, he had 676 snaps, and he was kind of below average player, and it was all right. And by last year, he had just under 900 snaps, and he was one of the better tackles, not just in New England, but around the country. So I like that he doesn't just have the measurables, John. He's gotten better each year as he's gone along. Because if you're an NFL team and you're going to take a guy from, no offense, but from UConn, you want to see, do they continually get better? Do they not just have the measurables, but are they going to continue to ascend as they go into an NFL program? And I think he's a guy that wherever he gets drafted, and I agree with you, he's probably later, maybe day 2-ish pick, he's going to get in and he's going to get better as time goes along. And I think, again, for coming from a school like a UConn or a not as, major of a football school, that matters.
It does matter. And one advantage that we have at New England Football Journal is we've covered these guys in person. So it's not just us watching film and then giving you our opinion. We've seen all of these guys play. So for us, it's a real advantage because we cover them on a week-to-week basis, and there's that in-person element. We've seen them at spring practices. We've seen them in fall camp. We've seen them in games. So when we give you this opinion of these local guys, it's because it's not just what we've seen on tape. We've watched these guys play and practice in person. I love Lunt. Like I said, I think he's a day 2, mid to late day 2 pick all day. I think he's a top 75, top 80 guy. Valentin Sen, who played left tackle for him, another guy who I think has the physical traits and the attributes to play in the NFL. Multi-year starter for UConn, a leader, a guy who kept that offensive line together. You mentioned Chase Lunt, Texas kid, comes up here, struggled early on in his career, started to really turn things around in 2022, and then he became their best offensive lineman in the last 2 years. But Valentin Sen was a guy that kept that group together. He's a guy that the Patriots could potentially show some interest in late in day 3. Couple of other names to keep in mind, not only for the Patriots, but guys to watch. Jelani Stafford, defensive tackle, really quick, explosive, can reset the line of scrimmage. Reminds me a little bit of Milton Williams, a smaller version of Milton Williams. Not as explosive, but a guy who I think has the potential to go higher than people think, John. Certainly a guy that you could see going early to middle of day 3. Another name to keep an eye on there. Excuse me, Malik Dixon Williams is another name to keep an eye on as well in their secondary, as well as Tua Famina Brown, a veteran linebacker who's played a lot of football. Another one of these versatile guys that can play on the ball, off the ball. You can use him in pressure packages. You can use him in a mug technique, and he can mug and drop. He was a big part of their simulated pressure packages at UConn, so he's certainly another guy to keep an eye on. There's going to be a lot of talent there on Tuesday. UConn, again, coming off a 9-4 season. There's about 4 or 5 guys on this list, John, that I really like for the Patriots. I love Chase Lunt for the Patriots. I think he's a guy that should be on their radar as a potential late day 2 guy. Really, really like Jaden McDonald and Brown at linebacker, 2 guys that I think would fit their scheme well as either late day 3 guys or priority free agents. And I like Malik Dixon Williams. I mean, he's a guy that, again, he can play safety over the top. You can walk him down on a slot. He can match up against a tight end. He's a versatile piece. Again, he's going to fit what they want to do. I think the Patriots are going to play a lot of man coverage. So
that is something too. The Patriots, they need that free safety center field type player.
They haven't had that since McCourty.
No, they haven't had it since
his scheme. Belichick went away from that when he started playing more 3 safety looks. And he's never been, if you remember, though, Belichick has never been a free safety, strong safety guy.
Yeah, and I think McCourty kind of made things different because he was so good at it. Obviously, Chung was so good in the box, they could do it. But you're right. I mean, they had, like, Tabucky Jones to me was more of a true free safety with Lawyer Malloy, but that was a 2-year thing really under Bill. And then, of course, Rodney Harrison comes in with Eugene Wilson, and they kind of mix and match with that. But I think that's a role the Patriots, they're going to play a ton of man. Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez, and if Marcus Jones is your slot guy, they're going to play a bunch of man. So that's a position that not day 1, maybe not even day 2, maybe late day 2, early day 3. I think it's going to behoove them to take a guy who can play legitimate free safety.
Yeah, no, I agree. UMass is, and by the way, Evan Rodriguez will be at UConn for us on Tuesday. He'll have full coverage of the Huskies Pro Day. Andrew Gwynn will be at UMass for us on Wednesday. UMass has some interesting names as well. There's a lot there that I like. And again, we're talking about potential late round priority free agent value. A couple of names to keep an eye on. Local names, Ethan Mottinger, guard. I coached against Ethan when he was at North Attleboro and I was at King Philip. I've watched him play a ton, both in high school and in college. Long, good athleticism, needs to play with a little bit better bend, but he's a guy that certainly could be in play for the Patriots as a priority free agent. Josh Atwood, who I also coached against when he was at Natick, New England heavyweight wrestling champion, a center. He's another interior offensive lineman, a Natick, product of Natick High School. He's another interior offensive lineman that the Patriots could potentially bring in as a priority free agent. A couple of other names to keep an eye on there that I really like as players and could be potential fits. Arsene Giles, a former Sacred Heart cornerback, transferred to URI originally. Then he transferred to UMass prior to last season. I really like him as a nickel potential punt returner. Really good football player, tough, willing to mix it up against the run, athletic, can match up in the slot against speedier slot types. And a couple of other guys, Lake Ellis, who I covered at Bryant, transferred to UMass. He's more of a field corner, I should say. He's about 6 feet, buck 90, give or take, but really good instincts, really good ball skills, can stay in phase down the field and make plays on the ball. And here we are talking about safety, John. Teray Powell, who was a multi-year, 4-year starter, in fact, at UMass. Another guy with really good instincts, good range, tough. He's kind of a hard fit for me because he's not really a free safety. He's a tweener. He's more of a strong safety, but certainly a guy that can play off the ball, screw down, and play in the box and support the run and offer special teams value. So those are some guys to keep an eye on for the Patriots if you're a Patriots fan. And obviously, on Wednesday, we're going to have the Bryant Pro Day. Bryant, URI, Bryant. I will be at that one on Wednesday. Landon Ruggieri from Bryant, wide receiver, could potentially get a free agent contract with the Patriots. One of the best wide receivers in FCS football last season. He's a player to watch out of Bryant. And Malik Grant, running back out of URI, the former Sacred Heart Pioneer who transferred to URI last year and was the key cog in their offense in their 11-win CAA championship season. He's going to be another player to watch at that pro day. So a lot going on. Holy Cross's pro day, by the way, is on Thursday.
I could see. I think isn't Jermaine Corbett out of Merrimack? He's working out at Holy Cross's pro day.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Some guys to keep an eye on there. Jermaine Corbett, covered him at Stonehill, Merrimack last year. Built low to the ground, had him on our Field of the Draft show a couple weeks ago. Really tough, physical runner, not afraid to square up and run the football inside the tackles. Runs with really good balance and vision, John. If he gets a defender one-on-one, he has the ability to stick it and cut it. And he's got some deceptive speed. When he gets into the third level, he can get you chunk runs. And if you're in plus territory, he can potentially finish. So another guy who's going to be on teams' radars as a priority free agent. And, of course, Kevin Stone and I are going to go into more detail about the guys' draft prospects tomorrow night on the New England Football Show. But certainly you mentioned him, another name. Another guy that I'll give you that's working out at UConn on Tuesday that I had on Field of the Draft last week that I love is Logan Tomlinson out of UNH. Started his career at Wesleyan. Big receiver, your prototypical boundary X. Guy that is a jump ball specialist, has strong hands, good body control, can win in contested catch situations. Could be a potential red zone option. I see a lot of Jake Bobo there, currently with the Seattle Seahawks, former Belmont Hill product. I see a lot of Jack Skoranek there, who's still in the league. That kind of guy, a really good route runner, strong hands, shows good body control in contested catch situations. Definitely a name to keep an eye on. Again, he's going to work out at UConn on Tuesday. And in case you haven't picked up on it, John, I'm starting to morph into Mel Kiper. Really good. I'm talking with that cadence. I guess that's what happens when your voice is tired and you're talking about scouting players. You turn into Mel Kiper.
Yeah, you're just a regular. At least I don't know. I don't want to be McShay because that would mean I'd get fired. But
hey, I worked with Todd.
Yeah,
Todd and I worked together at Scouts Inc. in 2001. I was an intern at Scouts Inc. Todd and Gary Horton taught me a lot about scouting. I mean, I was with them for 6 months, and it was a great experience. I used to go to Todd's apartment in Boston. He had an apartment down by the aquarium, and he would literally once a month I'd go to his place, really nice place, and he would give me a box with cassette tapes, and he'd say, "Go watch these guys and write scouting reports on them." And so that's what I did.
There you go.
In fact, I still use the Scouts Inc. template when I do my scouting reports on players. Almost 25 years later, I still use that same exact template. That's the template now that any publication you buy out there that actually does a breakdown, that's the template they use. It's kind of been the model.
Well, I mean, it's worked well for decades. So
yeah. So there you go. But yeah, I didn't mean to turn into Kuiper there on you though.
That's all right. That's good info. That's why you come. That's why you come to the New England Football Journal. I don't know how many other outlets are going to be covering the Bryant URI Pro Day, and then we've seen guys from these schools either get drafted on day 3 or they're undrafted free agents, and they're not everywhere in the NFL, but there's guys from these schools in the NFL.
Yeah, and listen, man, it's and I say it all the time. Basketball, hockey, it'd be nice to find that diamond in the rough. They could play on your third or your fourth line in hockey potentially. Basketball and come off the bench for you, be a productive piece. But really in football, especially, and baseball to a degree, you can really find a lot of talent in the later rounds. They're longer drafts. There's more available talent. I mean, again, it's amazing to me, John, when we first started covering these pro days a few years ago, and somebody said to me recently, they're like, you guys started a trend. No one used to cover these things outside of maybe the BC one if they had a
Yeah.
first round player. And I said, yeah, no, I get it, whatever. Um, but the thing is, there is talent there, and there is NFL professional football caliber talent. And like I said, when you look at the roster of guys that are going to work out this week, we've never had this many guys working out before. I mean, this just goes to show you how much talent there truly is locally now that we have this many guys that are good enough to get invited to a pro day and work out and get to prove themselves.
Yeah, and I think it starts at the top with BC. I mean, we said they have 5 guys at least that we think can get drafted, and not
Yeah.
just get drafted, but Izaraku is probably a first round pick, right? Trapillo probably a high second round pick. Like, so it's not just, hey, they have 5 guys that can get drafted. They have 5 guys that can get drafted and a couple guys that could go in the top 45 picks. So I think it really starts there. And obviously, you hope that can continue with Coach O'Brien there going forward. But I think it starts there and it's kind of spread out. I mean, I know Coach Chesney isn't at Holy Cross anymore, but we saw how good they were. We've seen how good UNH can be. They had draftable players the last couple of years. And I think we've seen that really over the last 5 years grow quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Ivy League guys.
Yeah.
So many Ivy League guys that are good enough to get a shot, not only to get drafted, but potentially sign as priority free agents and make it. I'm curious to see how Thor Griffin does, formerly of Harvard. He played at Louisville last year. Jonathan Mendoza, the big left tackle from Yale, multi-year starter there, played at Louisville last year, started for them. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's almost 6'9". So, you've got a lot of talent. We saw it with Mason Tipton out of Yale last year. He made the Saints. Undrafted free agent, signs, ends up making the team. So Joe Andreessen played at Bryant, transfers to Buffalo, huge numbers at Bryant. I mean, one of the best performances I've ever seen, John. I believe it was 3 years ago. Bryant at Brown. I covered that game. I swear, I feel like Joe Andreessen made every single tackle for Bryant in that game. He was a dude. Transfers to Buffalo. He's a Buffalo native. He's an upstate New York native. Transfers to University of Buffalo, keeps it rolling, gets a camp invite with the Bills, makes the team. And it was so rewarding for me, not to get corny here, John, but it was so rewarding for me after that Bills season finale. I went into Buffalo's locker room and I interviewed Joe. And it was great for me to see because, I mean, I remember going to those spring practices or those fall camp practices and watching a kid like that work his ass off. And he put himself in a position where he could get this opportunity to realize his childhood dream. And now, not only does he realize his childhood dream, but he's playing for his hometown team in the Buffalo Bills. So there's talent in the area, man. There's a lot of talent, and you're seeing it by the sheer number or the sheer amount of guys that that are going to get their opportunity to perform in front of scouts this week. Of course, you mentioned the NFL draft is a month away, which is hard to believe. So we do want to, as part of our last segment here, real quick, we do want to jump into beginning to preview our position. Well, let me go back. I mean, again, I've been talking too much. We are going to begin by previewing all the positions, even positions that may not be needs to the Patriots. So today, we're going to start with quarterback and running back. When you start in the backfield, look, you got Ramondre Stevenson in the mix. You got Antonio Gibson. You signed him to a multi-year deal. So those two guys are here. After that, though, John, it's pretty thin. The draft is going to be a place where the Patriots could address running back, and it's a deep class this year. They could potentially find a guy who could be a future starter.
Yeah, I mean, if they find a way to get themselves Dylan Sampson in the 3rd round, I think I'll give you a
He's
hug.
your guy.
But look, I think to your point, this is something they tried a couple years ago in 2022. They drafted Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris, and they failed. Both guys weren't good enough. And so it's something that they've had on their radar for a little while, and that was after they had Stevenson. But that's something they've had on their radar, and I think this draft is a great opportunity for them. especially too, John, to add some speed there. I mean,
Yep.
Stevenson is a powerful runner. He's a strong runner. Did have 7 fumbles last year, which was a major problem, but he's not a speed guy. Gibson is faster than Stevenson, but I don't look at him as a true speed guy that's going to change the game in that respect. So I want them at the running back position. I want to add some speed to that room. And frankly, I think they should draft a running back probably early day 3, and they should also sign a couple as undrafted free agents and let those guys battle it out, because I think even if you project this out, Stevenson's contract has an out after this season. If he has 7 fumbles again or something in that neighborhood, they might use that out and move on. Gibson's probably only going to be here another year. So, and even if those guys are good this year, it's really just Stevenson beyond this year that you would have here. So that's something I want them to address with multiple guys, preferably a high day 3 pick and then a couple undrafted free agents. But they need some youth in that room, and they need some speed in that room.
Yeah, and if you're talking about speed, now we need to talk about Quinshawn Junkins. We need to talk about
Yeah.
Travion Henderson, the 2 Ohio State guys. I think they're probably going to be gone by the time the Patriots take a running back, but you never know. Here's the thing. I think Henderson probably goes early second round. I don't see them taking a running back in the second round, John, but I could see them potentially taking one with one of those 2 third-round picks. And that's where I think it can get interesting, where Junkins could be in play there. Caleb Johnson could be in play there. Everybody's favorite, Cam Scatteraboo, could potentially be in play there. I think that's probably his sweet spot, early to mid third round. So they're going to have some options there. A couple of other guys that I like as well. I love Damian Martinez.
I was just going to bring him
Miami.
up.
Bigger back, super productive at Oregon State. Here I am again, talking like hyper. Super productive at Oregon State. Transfers to Miami. Kept producing there. Bigger back. Reminds me a little bit of Ramondre Stevenson, but he's not the receiver that Stevenson is. So he's another name to keep an eye on.
I like Brashard Smith, too, out of SMU.
Yeah.
Like he's not huge. I mean, he's not small,
but
but
he
5'10".
could be that change of pace back you're talking about.
He could be that guy that I think in the passing game could be an asset to them. I mean, he only had, 41 catches last year, as I look it up here. So he was productive in the passing game. We saw him, in that game later in the season against Boston College. So I think that's a player, too, that might be there with that early 4th round pick that they have.
Yeah, and Trevor Etienne out of Georgia, the former Florida Gator, is another name to keep an eye on as a potential day 3 value. And I like Jaden Blue out of Texas, man. He's smooth. He's in and out of his cuts with ease. He stays square. There's a lot of fluidity to his game, and he's got home run potential. He gets into that 3rd level, he could take it. He could take it all the way. So,
you talk about speed. Jaden Blue is the guy. And what I wonder about him is, does someone reach for him, somewhere in the 3rd round or something like that? Because that's a guy, you talk about the speed element, that kind of fits exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and look, let's face it, when you evaluate the running back position, you have to approach it with the mindset that it's really a 1 to 2 contract position. That's all it is in this day and age. Very rarely do running backs get to a 3rd or 4th contract and they're still productive. It's hard to do. Typically, we've seen all-time greats get that 4th contract at the position, but it's about maximizing that 1st contract and a 2nd contract. Anything beyond that, if the player is still producing at a high level, then that's an added bonus. But Jaden Blue is a guy who I think would be a really nice compliment to Stevenson and Gibson. He could give them that explosive change of pace type of back that they're lacking. A couple of other names to keep an eye on here. Montrell Johnson from Florida, I like. You mentioned Smith, who I also like. And RJ Harvey out of UCF, another guy that I would keep an eye on. Certainly a guy that the production was there, playing in that spread offense the last few years for Gus Malzahn. Another back who could square up, has some change of direction ability in space, and has deceptive speed, John. Once he gets into the 3rd level, he's another guy that's proven he can be a separator, especially in plus territory. So,
one other guy I would add too, and this is probably going to be maybe one of their 7th round picks in that area, is Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. Guy's a national champion.
Guy that was probably profiling as a much higher pick than that going into last season.
Yeah, and he just struggled this year. He had fumbling issues as well. But when he was the complement to Blake Corum a couple of years ago on that national championship team, I mean, they were a lethal duo. So again, if that's a guy that if you bring him in as a complement, we kind of talked about it with Kai Robichaux out of BC as well. If you bring him Donovan Edwards in as part of a running back group that already has a power back, I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. Now, quarterback is not a position of need per se. You have your franchise quarterback in Drake May. Interesting that there's been some stuff that has come out this week about Joe Milton. It sounds like the Patriots may not be shopping Joe Milton, but they're open to trading Joe Milton. There was a report yesterday that the Dallas Cowboys could potentially be a landing spot for a third-round pick. That's been out there. I've talked to a couple people, John, that told me that the Patriots are willing to move him, and a third-round pick is the asking price. Now, based on what we saw against the Buffalo game, and that's such a hard evaluation for me. He played really well, but it was against Buffalo's 2s and 3s. You do have to take that into account. Nonetheless, the physical tools were on full display. You and I have already talked about this. We probably would hold on to Milton because you never know. There's no rush to trade him. You already have 2 third-round picks anyway. But that being said, if, let's say, they do move off of Joe Milton and they do trade him and they do get the third-round pick, now they have 3 threes to work with. Now, all of a sudden, they're back in the quarterback market in this draft. You signed Josh Dobbs to back up Drake May, veteran backup, but you're going to need at least another 1 or 2 quarterbacks that you can develop, which means they'll probably end up drafting one and probably signing a priority free agent. The quarterback position this year, we know what it is at the top. It's a split view of the position at the top. I think most of the league likes Cam Ward, half the league likes Shadur Sanders. That on who falls where. Jackson Dart could be a potential first-round pick. Tyler Shuck, who's been a name that I've talked to a couple people that told me don't be surprised if he sneaks into the first round. Definitely comes off the board in the second round. But if the Patriots do, let's say, even if they don't trade Joe Milton, A, can you see them going for a quarterback in this draft? And B, if they do, who are a couple of guys that tickle John Lyons' fancy?
So look, first, I would not trade Joe Milton unless you're getting a mid to high third round pick, which I don't think is realistic right now. I'd hang on to him for a year. One thing about that Buffalo game, I know it was 2s and 3s, and you and I talked about this on our post game show. It showed his development from August to January because he was a guy, you and I were at training camp in August, and we were like, man, every throw is 100 miles an hour. He's looking at one read at a time, and that's kind of it. And by that Buffalo game, you saw a lot of improvement. Again, 2s and 3s, last game of the year, I get it, but at least you saw that development, and that's something I would want the Patriots to continue moving forward. But let's say if they were to trade him, if they did get a good offer, I think there's, I don't love the top of this quarterback draft. I think there's some interesting guys, though, in the
I
6th
love
and
the
7th
middle of
round.
it, though. I think there could be some developmental talent there.
Yeah, I look at Brady Cook out of Missouri, big guy, athletic, it can move. I think there's a lot to like there with him. Obviously, played in the SEC. I don't know how far Kyle McCord will fall out of Syracuse. I mean, he was at Ohio State.
I
They
really
didn't
like
like him
him.
enough. Yeah, they moved on. I mean, that was kind of a mutual parting of the ways. Like he transferred, but they didn't seem like they wanted him back that badly. He goes to Syracuse, leads the nation in passing. I mean, he's a good, I feel, pocket quarterback who also, I think, developed quite a bit from his Ohio State years through the end of last season. Obviously, it's playing at Syracuse in the ACC, not at Ohio State in the Big Ten. But I think there's some guys there. I also wonder, and I don't know exactly where Quinn Ewers is going to go, but that's a guy that I think there's, it felt like Arch Manning was breathing down his neck from the moment he came to Texas, and Ewers held on to that job. And he was pretty good. He got them to the Final Four twice. I mean, you look at that game they lost to Ohio State. I know he had the strip sack fumble, but I look at the 2nd and 5 play call where they ran a toss sweep and it got blown up, right at the goal line. So I think he's a guy that played pretty well in some of those games. He wasn't great though. I think there were times like that Georgia game stands out as a game that he looked really off for long stretches of that game. Obviously, they mounted a little bit of a comeback later, but he's a guy that if he fell too, I think could be in their neighborhood as well.
Yeah. I mean, I love Kyle McCord. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 6'3", 220, pocket passer. You want to see a little bit more in terms of the athleticism and the mobility, but he's certainly a guy that can
Yeah,
make
and he did
throws
have
at all
12
three levels.
interceptions last year too at Syracuse. So like their turnovers are an issue obviously
Yeah,
as well.
well, that's what I was going to say. He's a guy that can make every throw in the playbook. He can drive the ball down the field vertically, but limited mobility in the decision making is a concern. I do think in the right situation, he could potentially be a developmental starter, but more than likely a backup. Same goes with Will Howard. I love Will Howard. Now, the thing with Will Howard is you're going to get the size. It's the rare size. You're talking about a guy who's 6'4" and change. The arm talent is there. We know what he can do as a runner, really athletic. He did more of that at Kansas State than he did at Ohio State last
Didn't
year,
need to do it at Ohio
but he
State.
didn't need to do it, right, because he was playing with elite level talent. But all that being said, I love him as a developmental third quarterback, another guy who could potentially develop into a backup. But I think he's the one guy in this class, John, that has big time potential to be a starter and be a good starter in this league, a top 15, 20 guy anyway. But he's a ways away from that, but he could certainly be a really good backup.
Yeah, and I think that's really, and it's the reason that I wouldn't trade Joe Milton is that your goal right now should be to have a good backup to Drake May. And obviously they signed Josh Dobbs, as you mentioned. But if over the next couple of years, your quarterback room is May, Dobbs, and Milton, you can feel pretty good about that. Going for,
Yeah.
and we've seen with Drake May, multiple concussions and injuries last year. He left that Jets game early. Brissett had to come in and finish it off. He's not the biggest guy, and his play style, there could be an injury or two along the way that forces a spot start from a Dobbs or a Milton. So I think having a solid backup quarterback is a really valuable thing in the NFL. Now, if they feel really good about Dobbs and some team will offer them a mid-third round pick for it, fine. I get it. I'll do it. But other than that,
Milton, you mean?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. If the Patriots feel good about Dobbs as their backup and a team will offer them, mid-third round pick for Milton, then fine. Otherwise, I'm keeping him around for a year. And then who knows? Maybe you get a better draft pick for him next year or you need him in a game.
Well, that's just it. I think you brought up a really good point about Drake May. We forget that he had at least one documented concussion last year, more than likely two. I don't want to play neurologist here, but remember at the end of the season, he left, what was it, the Chargers game, I believe, and then he came back.
Yeah, and then he really shouldn't have come back, and then he left for the game for good after that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he has at least one documented concussion last year, and I do think his playing style is going to change. I think you're going to see him be more responsible. I think they're going to put him in a position where he takes less hits. But I do think, given his play style, given his where he's at in his development and his inclination to put the ball down and take off, I think you're going to need not just Josh Dobbs, but you're going to need a good third quarterback because potentially, especially given your current state of the offensive line too, let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Because potentially you're going to need that third quarterback at some point during the season. One other point that I want to make, I come from the Mike Holmgren school of thought. You draft a quarterback every year if you can. If you have enough draft capital and you don't have multiple needs across the boards, which the Patriots do, if you don't have multiple needs across the board, and Belichick espoused to this theory as well, you draft a quarterback. It is the ultimate development position. Draft a guy. You saw Holmgren do that in Green Bay. They traded for Favre, but while he was in Green Bay, they drafted Mark Brunell. They drafted Matt Hasselbeck. They drafted Matt Flynn. Like, you can develop guys, and if nothing else, John, you can develop them, and they can end up getting you future compensation. They can get you more compensation, which they usually do, than what you spent on them the year you drafted them. So for me, I'm a firm believer, and I know Elliot Wolf believes in this as well. It's something that his dad, Ron Wolf, believed in as well. If you can take a quarterback, take one. If you don't take one, at least bring in one as a priority free agent, maybe even two. The more arms you have in a camp, the more you can do. Let's not forget, the Packers were the first team to bring Kurt Warner in. And he was on their run. He went to camp with them initially. So that's what I'm saying. You never know what happens if you either draft a quarterback late or bring one in. We should know better than anybody. Patriots did that with Tom Brady, of course, with pick 199 in the 2000 NFL draft.
But even once Brady established himself, I mean, it felt like every 2 or 3 years they spent, draft capital on a quarterback. And I think I mean, some years it was Ryan Mallett and it, didn't end up having a lot of value. Other years it was Jimmy Garoppolo and it had value, right? So there were times that it
Kevin
had value.
O'Connell,
Yeah.
Cliff Kingsbury, they drafted
Yeah.
both those guys.
Yeah, Rohan Davey as well. I mean, he was the backup for a while. And again, having a backup quarterback in the NFL that you can depend on is a much more valuable thing than people realize. You're probably going to need that guy to win you a game or two over the course of the next couple of years. It just, and I know the NFL goes to great lengths to protect the quarterbacks, but you look at Drake May needs to add some muscle to his game. He will run around a lot. You have an offensive line that has not pass blocked well. I think it'll be better next year, but it's still a work in progress. You have receivers and tight ends that don't get open quick enough. All that stuff feeds together where having a backup quarterback that's good is valuable.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And there's Seth Hennigan out of Memphis is another name to keep an eye on as well. Again, we're also living in a time now where the days of the 6'5", 6'6" pocket passer are over. Most of your quarterbacks now, because of the spread and because of RPOs and the emphasis on ball handling, most of your quarterbacks now are in the neighborhood of 6'2" to 6'4". That's why I said earlier, Will Howard is kind of an anomaly in this group. But there is a lot of talent in the middle rounds of this draft at the quarterback position. I shouldn't say a lot of talent as much as potential talent.
Yeah, there's some intriguing guys in that day three area.
And it's a good spot to be if you're a team like the Patriots or a team that has an established starter, where if you want to invest in that position late in day three, there could potentially be a guy there with some legitimate upside. So, like I said, as we've seen through the years, the Patriots are the best example of it, right? Tom Brady, pick 199 in the 2000 NFL draft. I mean, the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably the greatest player of all time. So Patriots know the importance of taking a guy late and what it can mean to them. But just to finish up the conversation, I'm with you. It would be tempting to take a third-round pick for Milton if that were on the table in this draft, and I would consider it depending on where it was. But you're probably better off holding on to him and at least giving him another preseason where he can get meaningful reps and play in games, give him another camp, and give him a season in this offense and see where his development is. Then you go from there. So we shall see. There's no denying the talent is certainly there, the arm talent and the athleticism. And that's my concern ultimately. When you see that report, it's, well, the Cowboys are thinking about trading for him to be Dak Prescott's backup. They're not just trading for him to be Dak Prescott's backup. Prescott's on a big contract. This is a big year for Dak Prescott. They're trading for him. We know Jerry Jones' affinity for those type of quarterbacks. They did trade for Trey Lance after all. It's not just to be Prescott's backup. I do think that this is a big year for Prescott. He could be their future starter potentially. So it could be a real steal for the Cowboys down the road. All right, John, final thoughts here before we wrap it up.
Yeah,
I know I did a lot of talking today. My bad.
No, that's quite all right. Honestly, it speaks to your expertise in some of the local college prospects, which I think people should follow along if they haven't already. And look, we're going to get when we do this show next week, it's going to be March 30th, and the draft is going to be 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks away at that point. So it's coming around the corner. And I think what the Patriots have done, John, to me over the last couple of weeks is they have really clearly defined what they're going to do in this draft because they spend all this capital in free agency on defense. They don't trade for any offensive players. They signed 6 offensive players, but their headliners, again, all defensive guys. This is going to be, I think, an offensive-centric draft, and not just at pick 4. I think in the second round, third round, I wouldn't be surprised if 5 out of their first 6 players they draft are offensive guys. Now, obviously, if Abdul Carter's there at 4 and they love him, they might go him and the next 4 guys offense. But I really think that we're going to be sitting here post-draft and we're going to be talking about maybe 1 defensive player and the rest all offensive guys based off what they've done the last couple weeks.
Well, if you listen to Mel Kiper and his affinity for Shadur Sanders, Kiper's voice carries a lot of weight in the industry. And believe me when I tell you, I know everybody points to the Bill Tobin clip and who the hell is Mel Kiper? But at the end of the day, it carries weight. His opinion carries weight. And look, I love Mel Kiper. He's the godfather of the industry. I've been covering the NFL draft now for 25 years plus. But at the end of the day, he's been pretty wrong on quarterbacks through the years. I mean, he also thought Jimmy Clausen was going to be a franchise quarterback. So keep that in mind. All that being said, the reason I bring that up is, and why I do think it's important, is because if Shedeur Sanders is getting this kind of pub and the pro day matches the pub, he's going to go in the top 5 at least. At least. So that being said, Patriots could be in a pretty good spot for 2 reasons. One, that they're going to be a potential trade target if he gets past the Giants at 3. And 2, one of those elite level blue chip type players is going to fall to you, whether it be an Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter, let's not sleep on him. I mean, the Patriots, their affinity for him in scouting circles is well known. And I've talked to a couple of scouts who told me that don't be surprised if he's in play there.
I think if he can play wide receiver, he's going to be in play there.
Exactly. And I think that's the key here. And we talked about this a couple weeks back. The caveat here is, I think if the Patriots take him at 4, I think it's because they see him as a wide receiver. Yeah. I don't think that they're going to want to play him at corner, other than perhaps maybe using him in sub packages a la Julian Edelman.
Yeah, and I just think you don't sign Carlton Davis to a big deal, who, by the way, is not an old guy, right? Carlton Davis is going to be here for the length of that deal. You don't sign him to that and have Gonzalez if you're going to draft Hunter and play him at corner. I just don't. No. I don't see that. I think that told us what we need to know.
Yep. I agree.
Just like I don't think you sign Milton Williams if you're going to draft Mason Graham. Like, I think that kind of told us that too.
No, and I think that's an unbelievable point too. You mentioned Graham, right? They're not gonna sign. I mean, I'm sorry, they're not gonna draft Mason Graham now.
Yeah,
you'd have to think and I'm with you. This is going to be an offensive centric draft, and unless an Abdul Carter is sitting there, and let's face it, you can never have enough pass rushers. We saw that in the Super Bowl. Unless Abdul Carter is sitting there and there's some legitimate conviction there about him, Travis Hunter's in play at 4. And I think a trade now more than ever is in play at 4 as well. Because, again, I think Shedeur Sanders is going to knock his workout out of the park.
Yeah.
I really do. And I'm not a big Shedeur Sanders guy, but I do think he's going to knock his workout out of the park.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is going to be good for the Patriots because, again, yeah, he may not get past the Giants at 3, but where it's good for the Patriots is if he does, let's say, well, now the phone's going to ring, and you may end up getting a better package than I think we originally thought, given the current state of affairs at the quarterback position at the top of this draft. John, I want to say thank you for the time, as always, my friend. Always great talking football with you, and let's do this again next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We're, again, month away.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Patriots Pulse. For WEI's John Lyons, I'm John Sarianides. We will be back with you next week. Until then, be happy, be safe, peace, and support the guys working out this week in those pro days. See ya.